October 14th, 1942. The icy waters of the North Atlantic churned violently as Captain Lieutenant Heinrich Zimmermann peered through the periscope of U-333, his lips curling into a satisfied smile at the sight of another American merchant vessel silhouetted against the horizon. The Third Reich's wolf packs were feasting on Allied shipping with impunity, and Zimmermann was certain that Germany's undersea fleet would soon strangle the American war effort before it could even begin. He had no idea that thousands of miles away, in shipyards across America, an industrial miracle was already underway that would render his submarine campaign obsolete. Before we dive into this story, drop a quick hi in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. It really helps support the channel. This is the story of how America's unprecedented shipbuilding program transformed the Battle of the Atlantic, revealing a fundamental truth about modern warfare that German U-boat commanders would learn too late. Industrial might, not tactical brilliance, would determine the outcome of World War II. The warm Carolina sun beat down on Oberleutnant Werner Hartenstein as he stood on the bridge of U-156, scanning the vast expanse of ocean off Cape Hatteras. It was February 1942, just 2 months after Hitler had declared war on the United States, and Hartenstein could hardly believe his good fortune. The Americans had yet to implement a proper convoy system or even enforce basic blackout procedures along their eastern seaboard. At night, merchant ships were silhouetted perfectly against the illuminated coastline, what the German submariners called the American shooting gallery. Another one, Hercule, reported his first watch officer, Kurt Schmidt, pointing to a lumbering freighter moving north along the coast. Hartenstein raised his binoculars. Position: approximately 5,000 meters, bearing 045. Speed estimated at 8 knots. Perfect. Prepare for surface attack. We'll catch her just after sunset. The men of U-156 moved with practiced efficiency. Germany had invested heavily in its submarine force after the restrictions of the Versailles Treaty were cast aside. The Type IXE U-boat that Hartenstein commanded was among the most advanced submarines in the world, a 76.8-meter-long hunter with 6 torpedo tubes and 22 torpedoes. With a surface speed of 18.3 knots and a range of 13,450 nautical miles, it was designed specifically for the kind of hunting Hartenstein was doing now, far from German bases. Below deck, Chief Engineer Otto Hoffmann monitored the diesel engines that propelled U-156 through the gentle Atlantic swells. The distinctive rumble of the twin-man M9V4046 supercharged engines had become as familiar to him as his own heartbeat. Each engine produced 2,200 horsepower, allowing the submarine to cover vast distances in search of prey. Engine room temperature holding at 38 degrees Celsius, Hoffmann noted in his log. Fuel consumption optimal at current speed of 12 knots. He wiped sweat from his brow despite the relatively moderate temperature. The U-boat's cramped interior, home to 59 men for weeks at a time, never truly cooled, filled as it was with bodies, machinery, and the ever-present odor of diesel and sweat. In the control room, Navigation Officer Hans Weber plotted their position on a chart spread across a small table. His calculations put them approximately 30 nautical miles east of Cape Hatteras, perfectly positioned to intercept coastal traffic. That evening, the American freighter SS William Lundgren never saw the attack coming. 2 torpedoes struck her port side, sending 5,000 tons of war material, trucks, ammunition, and food to the ocean floor. Only 7 of her crew of 34 survived. Another victory for the Kriegsmarine, Schmidt said as they watched the ship slip beneath the waves. Hartenstein nodded but said nothing. Something bothered him about these easy kills. It seemed too simple, and in war, things that seemed too simple often concealed unexpected dangers. Meanwhile, in Washington, D.C., Admiral Ernest J. King slammed his fist on the conference table. "Gentlemen, we've lost 87 merchant ships in our own waters in the last month alone. Almost 500,000 tons of shipping gone. At this rate, we won't have enough vessels to sustain Britain, let alone build up for an invasion of Europe." The room fell silent. King, known for his fierce temper and brilliant tactical mind, had been appointed Commander-in-Chief of the United States Fleet following the disaster at Pearl Harbor. The situation is critical, continued Admiral Harold R. Stark, Chief of Naval Operations. The British are down to a 6-week supply of food. If we can't secure the sea lanes, they may be forced to consider terms with Hitler. King's expression darkened further. That is definitely not an option. Fleet Admiral William D. Leahy, Roosevelt's Chief of Staff, spoke next. The President is extremely concerned. He's asking for solutions, not problems. Rear Admiral Emery S. Land of the U.S. Maritime Commission pushed a folder across the table. Sir, I believe we have a partial solution. The Liberty Ship Program. King flipped through the plans, his eyebrows raising slightly. Mass production techniques applied to shipbuilding? Can this actually work? It's already working, Land replied. The first Liberty ship, the SS Patrick Henry, was launched last December. Took 244 days to build. The newest one took just 92. And Mr. Kaiser out in Richmond believes he can get it down to under 60 days. Kaiser? The dam builder? King asked skeptically. Yes, sir. Henry J. Kaiser. Never built a ship before 1941, but he's revolutionizing the industry as we speak. Admiral King stared at the production projections. 2,000 ships in 4 years. Impossible. With respect, sir, that's what the Germans think too, Land said with a slight smile. And that's our advantage. By June 1942, the situation in the Atlantic had grown dire. The period known as the Second Happy Time, or the American Shooting Gallery, to German U-boat crews had resulted in devastating losses for the Allies. Over 585 Allied ships totaling more than 3 million tons had been sunk along America's eastern seaboard with the loss of only 22 U-boats. Commander Karl Donitz, leader of the Kriegsmarine's submarine force, reviewed the latest success reports with satisfaction in his headquarters in Paris. His strategy of Rudel tactic, Wolfpack tactics, was working brilliantly. Groups of U-boats would spread out to search for convoys, and once one was located, the finding submarine would call in the others for a coordinated night attack on the surface, where the submarine's low profile made them difficult to spot. Our monthly sinking rate exceeds 500,000 tons, his chief of staff noted. That's more than twice what the Allies can build. Donitz nodded, but his expression remained grave. For now, but the Americans have resources we can only dream of. What are our latest intelligence reports from their shipyards? Nothing significant. They're launching Liberty ships, but they're crude, mass-produced vessels. Ugly, slow, and primitive. Some of our commanders report they break apart with a single torpedo hit. Donitz frowned. Numbers, Corvette and Captain. I need numbers. Approximately 40 ships launched in May. Perhaps 50 projected for June. That's still only half of what we're sinking, Donitz said thoughtfully. But it's a trend we must watch closely. The American capacity for production should never be underestimated. In Portland, Oregon, 20-year-old Sarah Miller adjusted her welding mask and prepared to join another seam on the hull of hull number 440, what would soon be christened the SS Benjamin Warner. Before 1942, she had never imagined working in a shipyard. She had been a secretary at an insurance company, typing letters and filing paperwork. Now she was one of thousands of women who had answered the call to fill jobs left vacant by men joining the military. The transformation had been both physical and mental. Her once soft hands were now calloused and strong, capable of handling welding equipment for 10-hour shifts. Her blonde hair was constantly tucked under a bandana to prevent it from catching fire from welding sparks. She had traded dresses and heels for overalls and steel-toed boots, and she had never felt more alive or purposeful. Sarah shared a small apartment with 3 other women shipyard workers. Eleanor was a riveter who had lost her husband at Pearl Harbor. Maria, a second-generation Mexican-American, operated a crane with remarkable precision. And Dorothy, at 45, was the oldest of the group, having worked as a seamstress before bringing her steady hands to the detail welding team. Together, they represented the changing face of American industry. Looking good, Sparky, called her supervisor, checking her work. Sparky was Sarah's nickname in the yard, earned after her first week when her welding had produced more sparks than seams. Thanks, Mr. Peterson. Is it true what they're saying? That we're going to try to build this one in 10 days? Peterson nodded. Kaiser's making it a competition between all his yards. Winner gets a bonus. Richmond's already got it down to 14 days. Sarah whistled. 10 days to build an entire ship. My father wouldn't believe it. Your father's in the Merchant Marine, right? Yes, sir. Currently on a Liberty ship somewhere in the Atlantic. That's why I'm here. Every day I work faster means another ship that might bring him home safe. Sarah's father, Captain James Miller, had been a commercial sailor before the war. When the Merchant Marine began recruiting experienced seamen to crew the growing fleet of Liberty ships, he had volunteered immediately. His most recent letter, now worn from repeated reading, described crossing the Atlantic in a convoy of 38 ships, including 15 Liberty ships carrying everything from tanks to medical supplies. They had lost 3 vessels to U-boats, but the remaining ships had made it to Liverpool intact. Just keep those ships coming, he had written. Out here, a new Liberty ship is worth more than a destroyer. They can sink us, but they can't sink all of us. After her shift, Sarah joined hundreds of other workers at a rally in the shipyard. A massive banner proclaimed, "Keep 'em sailing," above the speaker's platform. The shipyard manager introduced their special guest, a merchant sailor who had survived 2 torpedo attacks. I'm here to tell you that your work matters, the sailor told the assembled workers. Last month, I watched a U-boat sink a Liberty ship in our convoy. 20 minutes later, another Liberty took its place in the formation. I could almost see the frustration on the German commander's face through his periscope. They're learning what American production means, that for every blow they strike, we respond tenfold. As the crowd cheered, Sarah felt a surge of pride. She wasn't just building ships. She was striking blows against fascism with every weld she completed, every rivet she placed, every shift she worked. The war might be fought by men with guns on distant fronts, but it would be won by men and women with tools on the home front. The Liberty ships were a marvel of simplified design and mass production. Based on a British cargo ship design, they were adapted for mass production by American industrialists. At 441 feet long and 56 feet wide, with a capacity of 10,500 deadweight tons, they weren't particularly large for ocean-going cargo vessels. They weren't fast either, managing just 11 knots, slower than the 18 knots a surfaced U-boat could achieve. But they made up for these shortcomings in sheer numbers. The ships were built in sections, with prefabricated components assembled on massive slipways. Traditional shipbuilding techniques had been replaced by assembly line methods, with the ships divided into hundreds of sub-assemblies that could be built simultaneously. The most revolutionary change was the switch from riveting to welding, which was not only stronger, but could be taught to inexperienced workers in a fraction of the time. Each Liberty ship required 3,425 tons of hull steel and 2,725 tons of plate steel. Over 250,000 parts went into each vessel, with 600,000 rivets used in early models before welding became standard. The ships were powered by triple expansion steam engines generating 2,500 horsepower. Obsolete, but simple, reliable, and easy to manufacture. The ships were divided into 5 holds, designed to carry a variety of cargo from tanks and trucks to food and ammunition. Each ship could carry 2,840 jeeps for 140 tanks or 230 million rounds of rifle ammunition, enough to supply an entire army division. Perhaps most remarkable was the workforce that built them. Women made up 38% of the shipyard labor force by 1943, performing jobs previously considered exclusively male domain. African Americans, previously restricted to menial roles in most industries, filled skilled positions throughout the shipyards. People with disabilities found meaningful employment, and the average age of workers rose substantially as retired craftsmen returned to teach their skills to the next generation. In total, the Liberty Ship program employed over 650,000 Americans, many of whom had never seen a ship before 1941. By mid-1942, 18 American shipyards were producing Liberty ships. The most efficient was Permanente Metals in Richmond, California, run by Henry J. Kaiser, who had previously built dams and bridges but never a ship before the war. Kaiser's innovations were cutting production time dramatically with each new vessel. On the other side of the Atlantic, Corvettan Captain Adalbert Schneevu 201 was having the hunt of his life. His submarine was part of Wolf Pack, Hecht, Pike, which had been harassing convoy on 127 for 3 days. They had already sunk 7 ships, and now U-201 was closing in on another straggler. Target identified as Liberty Ship Class, his first watch officer reported. Range 600 meters. Schnee almost laughed. The Americans and their assembly line ships. I've heard the welds crack under normal ocean pressure. 1 torpedo is all we need. Tube 1 ready. Hercule. Fire. The torpedo ran straight and true, striking the Liberty ship SS Robert Fulton midships. The explosion sent a column of water skyward, but to Schnee's surprise, the ship didn't immediately begin to sink. Second torpedo. Fire. After the second hit, the Robert Fulton began to list heavily, but her crew had already begun abandoned ship procedures. Most would survive to sail again on yet another Liberty ship within weeks. What Schnee didn't realize was that the very simplicity of the Liberty ships was proving to be an advantage. Their all-welded hulls, while sometimes prone to fractures in the frigid North Atlantic, were also compartmentalized in ways that made them surprisingly difficult to sink with a single torpedo. And while U-boats could sink Liberty ships faster than any single shipyard could build them, they couldn't sink them faster than all American shipyards combined could launch them. By the end of 1942, the tide was beginning to turn. In November, American shipyards launched 121 new merchant vessels, the majority being Liberty ships, totaling 1.2 million tons. The U-boat fleet had sunk 117 Allied ships that same month, approximately 700,000 tons. For the first time, construction was outpacing destruction. Back in Berlin, Grand Admiral Erich Raeder presented the latest Atlantic statistics to Adolf Hitler with evident concern. Mein Führer, while our U-boats continue to achieve significant successes, the Americans are now launching more ships than we can sink. Their Liberty ship program has exceeded all expectations. Hitler dismissed his concerns with a wave. These are just simple cargo vessels, are they not? Primitive constructions that can barely stay afloat. With respect, Mein Führer, their simplicity is their strength. The Americans don't need each ship to be perfect. They only need them to make 1 or 2 successful voyages. Their strategy is to overwhelm us with numbers, not quality. Hitler's face darkened. And how many U-boats are we producing each month? 20, Mein Führer. We hope to increase to 25 by spring. And how many of these Liberty ships are the Americans producing? Raeder hesitated. In November, approximately 90. Their projections for 1943 suggest they may exceed 150 per month. Hitler fell silent, the implications settling heavily in the room. Meanwhile, at the Bethlehem Fairfield shipyard in Baltimore, a remarkable event was about to unfold. On December 15, 1942, the SS Robert E. Peary was about to be launched, just 4 days and 15 hours after her keel was laid. It was a world record that would stand for the duration of the war, a feat of industrial efficiency that seemed to defy the laws of physics. The shipyard manager addressed the assembled workers and press. What you've accomplished here will echo across the Atlantic. Every German submarine commander will hear about this ship, and they'll know they're fighting not just the Allied navies, but the full might of American industry. The workers cheered as the massive ship slid down the slipway into the water. Among them was Frank Pearson, a 50-year-old riveter who had come out of retirement to join the war effort. "My son's in the Navy," he told a reporter. "Every ship we build here means more supplies for him and his buddies. The Germans might have a head start, but they don't understand what happens when you make Americans angry." By early 1943, the Battle of the Atlantic was entering a new phase. Allied anti-submarine measures had improved dramatically. Aircraft equipped with radar, hunter-killer destroyer groups, and better convoy tactics were making U-boat attacks increasingly dangerous. But perhaps the most demoralizing factor for the German submariners was the seemingly endless stream of new merchant ships. On U-333, Captain Lieutenant Heinrich Zimmermann was no longer smiling as he patrolled the convoy route south of Iceland. His boat had been at sea for 42 days and had managed to sink only 2 ships, both stragglers from convoys. Fuel was running low, and morale was suffering. Life aboard a U-boat had never been comfortable, but extended patrols made conditions nearly unbearable. The 769-ton Type VIC submarine housed 44 men in a space originally designed for half that number. Privacy was non-existent, with sailors hot bunking, sharing the same bunk in shifts. During depth charge attacks, men could do nothing but sit in darkness, listening to the pings of enemy sonar and explosions that rocked the hull. The air inside U-333 had grown progressively fouler as the patrol extended. Fresh food had long since been consumed, leaving only preserved rations. Water was strictly rationed, making personal hygiene a distant memory. The crew's beards had grown wild, their uniforms stiff with salt and sweat. Radio operator Matthias Berkel's health had deteriorated most noticeably. The young man from Dresden had developed a persistent cough that echoed through the boat during quiet hours. Any improvement? Zimmerman asked the boat's medic, Sanitätschefreiter Wolfgang Kraus, after examining Berkel. None, Herr Kalu. Kraus replied quietly. His lungs sound worse. He needs a hospital. Zimmerman nodded grimly. 2 more weeks until we reach port. Keep him comfortable. Another convoy reported. Herr Kalu, his radio operator said, handing him a message. Wolfpack Berggraf is assembling to attack. Zimmerman read the coordinates. The convoy was less than 100 nautical miles away, a tempting target. But the last 3 attacks had resulted in the loss of 5 U-boats. The hunters were becoming the hunted. Plot an intercept course, but will remain cautious, he ordered. Observe first, attack only if conditions are perfect. When U-333 reached the convoy's path 12 hours later, what Zimmerman saw through his periscope was disheartening. 40 merchant ships in tight formation, surrounded by no fewer than 8 destroyers and a small aircraft carrier. And there, in the center of the formation, were at least a dozen Liberty ships, their distinctive profile unmistakable. So many, muttered his first watch officer. And for every one we sink, they launch 3 more. Zimmerman didn't respond immediately. He was calculating torpedo angles, evaluating the destroyer patrol patterns, considering the risk versus reward. Finally, he gave the order that would have been unthinkable a year earlier. Take us deep. We'll let this one pass. The change in the U-boat campaign was reflected in the numbers. In March 1943, U-boats sank 120 Allied ships, totaling 693,000 tons, their most successful month of the year. But they lost 15 submarines doing so, an unsustainable exchange rate for Germany. In May 1943, the losses became catastrophic. 43 U-boats were destroyed in a single month, forcing Dönitz to temporarily withdraw his forces from the North Atlantic. At a Kriegsmarine staff meeting in Berlin that June, the mood was somber. Admiral Dönitz, recently promoted to replace Raeder as head of the German Navy, addressed his senior officers. Gentlemen, we must face facts. The Battle of the Atlantic has entered a new phase. American shipbuilding has exceeded even our worst projections. They launched 140 merchant ships last month alone. Their Liberty ship program will deliver approximately 1,600 vessels by year's end, with hundreds more planned for 1944. Captain zur See Hans Rudolf Rosing, who oversaw U-boat operations in the Atlantic, added more context to the dire situation. Our intelligence indicates their newest vessels are being completed in under 20 days from keel laying to launch. The record stands at 4 days and 15 hours. By comparison, our Type VIC submarines require at least 6 months to construct. How is this possible? Demanded one staff officer. These must be unseaworthy vessels, death traps for their crews. On the contrary, Rosing replied, while not elegant, they are functional. Their simplicity is their genius. 3 Liberty ships have been torpedoed and remained afloat. One was split in half by torpedo damage, and they simply welded the 2 halves back together. It returned to service as the SS William Camp. The officers exchanged disbelieving glances. What about our new Type XXI submarines? Another asked. With snorkel capability and higher underwater speeds, surely they will change the equation. Dönitz shook his head. The Type XXI won't enter service until 1944, and even then, production will be limited by industrial constraints and Allied bombing. Gentlemen, we must accept a fundamental truth. Germany cannot match American industrial output. Our strategy must adapt accordingly. That adaptation would come too late for many U-boat crews. What the Germans called the Black May of 1943 marked the turning point in the Battle of the Atlantic. The U-boat arm would never recover from its losses, and though the battle would continue until the war's end, the crisis had passed. By 1944, Liberty ships were being completed in an average of 42 days, with many shipyards regularly achieving 30-day deliveries. The record set by the SS Robert E. Peary would never be broken, but it didn't need to be. Quantity had a quality all its own. One Liberty ship, the SS Jeremiah O'Brien, was steaming across the English Channel as part of the massive armada supporting the D-Day landings on June 6, 1944. Her captain, Edward Macaulay, had already survived 2 torpedo attacks in previous vessels. "See that?" he said to his first officer, pointing at the endless procession of ships stretching to the horizon. "That's what's going to win this war. Not just the boys storming the beaches, brave as they are, but this. Steel and factories and welders working double shifts in Baltimore and Portland." In the final years of the war, America's shipbuilding miracle reached its peak. In 1943, American shipyards produced 11.5 million tons of merchant shipping, rising to 16.9 million tons in 1944. The shipyards dedicated to Liberty ship construction were launching vessels at a rate that would have seemed impossible in pre-war years. The impact on German U-boat crews was devastating, not just tactically, but psychologically. Oberleutnant Werner Hartenstein, who had once hunted with such confidence off Cape Hatteras, did not live to see the end of the campaign. His submarine, U-156, was sunk by a U.S. Navy aircraft on March 8, 1943. All 52 crew members were lost. Heinrich Zimmermann of U-333 survived longer, adapting to the changing nature of the war. By late 1944, his patrols consisted mainly of avoiding detection rather than seeking targets. The hunter had become the hunted. We received news today that Kaiser Shipbuilding launched its 1,000th vessel. He wrote in his war diary on December 10, 1944. U-333 was sunk on July 31, 1944, by a British warship. Zimmermann was among the 12 survivors of the 45-man crew, spending the remainder of the war as a prisoner. For the workers who built the Liberty ships, victory brought a mixture of pride and change. Sarah Miller, the welder from Portland who had helped build dozens of vessels throughout the war, faced an uncertain future as the shipyards began to scale back production. "What will you do after the war?" her supervisor asked as they watched their final Liberty ship, hull number 2542, slide down the slipway in April 1945. Sarah removed her welding mask and considered the question. "I'm not sure. They say women should go back home. Let the men have the jobs again. But after this," she gestured at the massive vessel they had helped create. "How do you go back to typing letters and making coffee?" Many women like Sarah would indeed be forced out of industrial jobs after the war. But they had proven what was possible, contributing to what President Roosevelt called the arsenal of democracy that had overwhelmed the Axis powers with sheer productive capacity. The numbers tell the final story of the Liberty ship program versus the U-boat campaign. Between 1941 and 1945, American shipyards produced 2,710 Liberty ships, totaling over 38 million deadweight tons. In the same period, German shipyards built approximately 650 U-boats, of which 781, including pre-war construction, were deployed and 785 were lost. Of the Liberty ships built, 200 were lost to enemy action, accidents, or severe weather, a loss rate of just 7.4%. Many served long after the war, with the last Liberty ships finally being scrapped in the 1970s. A few were preserved as museum ships, including the SS Jeremiah O'Brien in San Francisco and the SS John W. Brown in Baltimore, living monuments to America's industrial triumph. The Liberty ships represented more than just vessels. They embodied a fundamental lesson about modern warfare that the German high command had failed to grasp. Industrial capacity, more than tactical brilliance or technological sophistication, would determine the outcome of the global conflict. For the German U-boat commanders who had begun the war with such confidence in their tactical and technological superiority, the flood of Liberty ships crossing the Atlantic delivered a sobering education. The seas they had once dominated with their wolf packs had become their graveyard, as American shipyards outproduced German torpedoes at a rate that made strategic victory impossible. In the end, it wasn't sophisticated weapons systems or brilliant tactical innovations that decided the Battle of the Atlantic. It was the humble Liberty ship, designed for simplicity, built for speed of production, and deployed in numbers that overwhelmed Germany's capacity to sink them. In the ledger books of war, American welders and shipfitters had defeated German torpedoes and periscopes. And that concludes our story. If you made it this far, please share your thoughts in the comments. What part of this historical account surprised you most? Don't forget to subscribe for more untold stories from World War II, and check out the video on screen for another incredible tale from history. Until next time.